2018 South Coast Air Quality Management District Governing Board meeting. We'll start this morning's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. So will everybody please rise and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So let me ask the executive director a question. If there's public testimony on a consent calendar item, how do we know which ones to pull? I don't want to start out messing up the new system, but hello, somebody, anybody?
We're trying to make that assessment. So as I understand, Dr. Burke, you're asking if there's a comment on a consent item, how is it pulled?
Yeah, how do I know by looking at this which ones to pull?
Only, Mr. Chair, this is the clerk. Only the items that have a request to speak will show there on your screen. So you should see 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are, and 7.
I got 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 25.
Those are all the items that have had requests to address the board.
So you start with 1 through 16.
Okay, so I'm pulling items 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9. Okay. No, those are presentations. Okay, I'm going to start by pulling those. Is there any additional items that the board or the staff would like to pull?
Mr. Chair?
Oh, yeah. You'd like 4?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
4, oh, yeah, 4 is already pulled. Okay.
I just want to note
Okay.
that. Thank you.
And Dr. Burke, staff is going to pull item number 27.
But
That's not the
that's
consent calendar.
not
That's
the
the
consent.
AB 2588 program. It's come to our attention that there were some missed opportunities for additional public input, and we believe that it's warranted in this case, so we're going to pull this item. We're under no tight deadline for this one.
Okay, so we will be canceling that, continuing that item.
Yes, sir.
It's going to be a quick board meeting.
Oh, don't say that. You know that always.
That always takes us, right? Okay. May I have a motion on then items 1, 6, 8, and 9? Oh, is Larry
Not
here?
9.
Larry's not here.
9
Is he coming today? Is Larry coming today? No. No, okay. I was going to compliment him. In 25 years, and I'm going to call him and tell him this. In 25 years of MSRC lists that have come before this board, this is the best list I have ever seen. So he's the chair of that committee.
Yep.
So I wanted him to, I'm so sorry he's not here, but I'm going to call him and tell him that. Okay. Minus those items, minus 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 9. May I get a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I need to reveal that on items number 2 and 7, I don't have a financial interest, but I am required to identify for the record that I am a member of the California Air Resources Board. I know 9 is pulled, but I'll mention that right now. And 7 is pulled, I guess, as well.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yeah, and item 2, I'm going to take a financial conflict on that one and not participate in item 2. And in item 9, my county, Riverside County, is one of the recipients, and so I just want to put that on the record. I don't know if that's a conflict of interest or not, but make everyone know about that before we vote.
Okay. So in the balance of the items, may I get a motion?
I have to recuse myself if I could, Mr. Chair. I'm going to recuse myself from items involving contracts with feedback from companies, making charitable contributions to my employer, the Coalition for Clean Air. And so I got to recuse myself from items 3, 4, 5, and 9. Recusing myself from item number 3 because Clean Energy Fuels, CR&R, Cummings Incorporated, Sempra Energy Utilities, Trillium CNG, Waste Management Incorporated, Gladstein, Neandros, and Associates are potential sources of income which are materially affected by this item. I'm recusing myself from item number 4 because the Port of Long Beach is part of the San Pedro Bay Port Complex and is a potential source of income which is materially affected by this item. Recusing myself from item number 5 because University of California, Riverside, Sonoma Technology, and Gladstein, Neandros, and Associates are potential sources of income materially affected by this item, and recusing myself from item 9 because County of Riverside and City of Los Angeles are potential sources of income which are materially affected by that item. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Mr. Chairman. Also on item 9, the Waste Management and CC&R, I have a campaign donations from them in the last 12 months, so I also not participate in that one.
Supervisor Rutherford?
I'll be recusing myself from item number 3 because of a campaign contribution from CR&R Incorporated in the last 12 months.
And
CC&R, that was number 3.
Supervisor
Anything
Solis, so
CC&R, Waste Management, I'm out of. Okay, that was item 3. Okay, and 9.
Supervisor Solis, do you have any additional?
No, I
No.
want to move the consent.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there, I noticed you had, Mr. Nastri,
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to note that Rule 1469, which was of interest to many members of the public, just to note that we have set hearing established for September 7th, and I know that we're dark next month, so we just wanted to remind people that set hearing for 1469 is in September. Thank you.
and Councilmember Robinson?
So is the motion just to move items 1, 6, and 8?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Because I need to
No
recuse
problem.
myself from item 3, but I'll wait till that pops up, so.
Okay. We have a motion. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, then those items are carried. Item number 2, Mr. Eder, will you come to the microphone? Mr. Eder?
Go grab him. Mr. Chair, as Harvey makes his way to the microphone, I'd like to acknowledge that we have our interns here joining us today, and we had breakfast with them this morning. Thank you, guys.
Okay, I'll call it back. Why don't you speak on 2 and 3, Mr. Eder, while you're there?
2 and what?
3.
2 and 3.
You know, I don't think you're going to have enough time to speak on 2, 3, and 4.
Well, I'll have to cut them up like I've done before.
Okay.
I wanted to speak on 5 as well. Let's see. A point of clarification, does the 6-minute limit to issues on the agenda is on its own, and public comment gets 3 minutes as well?
I have to ask the legal people.
Excuse me, Dr. Burke, we were conferring on a potential conflict. Could we have the question repeated?
The time limits for comments. It's 3 minutes
3 minutes, Mr. Chair,
for the,
for the consent calendar items.
For each item,
For total for the consent calendar items.
total, that's what I thought.
and then he gets 3 minutes for each, yes, each
Would you
other
restart his
agenda item
time,
and
Paul,
public comment period.
would you go back to 3 minutes? Because we shouldn't use our time for him. Okay,
So it's 3 minutes on the consent agenda
that's my understanding from
And-
legal.
and other items, like if there's a hearing later on? I
Then-
guess that's open, that's right? And
Yes,
and then public comment as well. All right.
that's, for the consent calendar, there's 3 minutes total. For the hearings, there would be 3 minutes for that. For public comment, that's a separate 3 minutes.
Now, so when you say the calendar, does that mean you get a total of 3 minutes for the whole calendar or 3 minutes for each item?
3 minutes for the consent calendar items, which would be essentially generally
got
1
that.
through 24.
But if you wanted to, say there were 2 items that he wanted to speak on the regular calendar, does he get 3 minutes per item, or is it a total of 3 minutes?
On the, when you say the regular calendar,
Off the consent, when you get past the consent calendar and go to the regular calendar,
so like items 25, 26,
that's actual. This is a theoretical question. Say there were 20 more items on there, and he wanted to speak on 3 of them. Would he get 3 minutes for those 3?
as the rules are currently constructed, he would, sir.
3. Okay. You got that, Harvey?
So 3, I was passing there. I'm looking at the items to see what I'm talking about, but excuse me.
Well, here, let me roll it back for you. You get 3 minutes on the consent calendar. That's all the items on the consent calendar.
All right.
Then you get 3 minutes for each item on the regular calendar.
Okay.
And then you get 3 minutes in public comment.
Okay. All right. Thank
Okay.
you for clarifying. I guess I'm speaking on 2, 3, 4, and 5? Yeah.
That's what you signed up for.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, the theme here is natural gas. In the Health and Safety Code 53,002 and B, it says it's a legislative intent from 1981 not to import natural gas into the state, non-renewable, and 90% of our gas comes from out of state, and it's fracked and everything else. Anyway, so all this stuff with natural gas is basically illegal under the Health and Safety Code. And in terms of technology forcing, the Supreme Court case from 12 with the coating manufacturers said that best available retrofit control technology is technology forcing. That's clear. You're pushing in. You've got the issue of greenhouse gases and whatnot has been put down before. I've been told by senior staff we're not concerned about that. Anyway, that's off the record. On the record now. That these issues of the $60 million, first of all, if you can do research on natural gas at UC Artis Center, anything you spent on natural gas should be spent as well on solar and solar implementation and conversion with the district, and as well as money that you spend in the past. It has to be at least, never looked at it for toxics. There's formaldehyde, benzene, etc. This is setting the foundation in number 4 and number 5 for the $60 million, and it needs to have hearings and to be looked at, again, in reference to solar conversion. So where it says reclaim, for vehicles, the emphasis on 20 trucks is good, but, you know, again, it's pushing natural gas, and there are all of these problems that haven't been addressed. It's like the state has, it's excuse me, potentially schizophrenic. You've got a law, health and safety code says you can't use this in the state, and then both the district and the state, CARB, push this, and that's what we're looking at now. But they're only looking at reducing NOx. They're ignoring PM, like 2.5, and for ozone, the state and the district have never met federal or state codes, and these are state codes, state law, and state issues. If we want to go beyond them, we can go beyond them. Anyway, I'll try to talk a little more, less rambling, but anyway, you got the basic overview, and would have liked to address specifically each one, but for lack of time. Any questions? No?
No. Any questions by my colleagues?
All
No,
right.
no questions.
Thank you.
So may I get a motion on 2 and 3?
Mr. Chair, just one question on 2 for
Yes.
staff. On 2, Wayne, it mentioned 360 different oil and natural gas facilities. Can you describe those? Are those just I know they're much more than refineries. What type of facilities, just so I get a picture?
So this encompasses the range. It can be just from the derrick that you would see in an open field, a small one. It could be like an Alanco type situation of oil production. So these are just the independent wells that are out and about. And so CARB developed their oil and gas rule, and we'll be inspecting these kind of facilities. So it could vary, but that should give you an idea.
Okay, there's 360 in our basin. And we inspect those how often, if we ever do?
Well, we're going to be inspecting them a lot more frequently through this MOU with ARB.
Good.
But so depending on size, anywhere from once a year to once every 2 to 3 years.
Okay, great, thanks.
Sure.
I'll move item number 2, Mr. Chair.
Is there any opposition to this item? Hearing none, this item is approved. Item number 4, we have testimony.
Mr. Chair, I think the motion was just with item number 2. If I
Did you also
heard
want
correctly.
item 3 also?
Yes.
So with item number 3, I misspoke earlier. I don't need to recuse myself, but for agenda item number 3, I don't have a financial interest, but I'm required to identify for the record that I'm a member of the California Natural Gas Vehicle Partnership, which you so graciously appointed me to, which is involved with this item. So just wanted to state that for the record.
I'll move item 3, Mr. Chair.
And I'll second that.
We have, I've just been notified that with the arrival of Supervisor Nelson, we have a quorum for item number 3.
So moved.
So can we get a motion on 3 again?
Move it.
I'm big into recognizing revenue, so
Okay.
I'll move the item.
Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Is there any opposition to this item? Hearing none, item 3 is approved. Item number 4, Ms. Jessica Drum.
She comes.
I thought that the speakers, there we go. So everybody can see, come to vacant microphone in the order in which they appear on the screen.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Jessica Durham, and I'm the director of the Ports Project at LANE, the LA Alliance for New Economy. And I'm speaking on agenda item number 4, and to urge you to both disclose the fleet partners on the project and also include conditions in this and future agreements to ensure that subsidy recipients must be in full compliance with all of our laws, especially labor laws. For over 12 years, LANE has advocated for a port trucking industry that is more equitable and just for all, where clean air and good jobs go hand in hand. And as part of that work, we've monitored the implementation of the Clean Truck Program and related subsidies over the years. And 10 years ago, we published a report called Foreclosure on Wheels, that took a close look at the lease-to-own program that Daimler set up at the Port of Long Beach. We predicted that the program, which pushed the costs of the trucks onto the backs of already struggling drivers, would, quote, wreak havoc on the financial lives of port drivers, their families, and their communities. Sadly, these predictions proved true, and after these and other lease-to-own schemes were implemented at the ports, drivers shouldered the cost of the previous generation of clean trucks. Over the past year, the aftermath was extensively documented in the Pulitzer finalist Investigative USA Today series, which documented the system at our ports as modern-day indentured servitude. 3 of the drivers profiled in the series worked for KNR Transportation, which is a subsidiary of Cal Cartage, which was recently purchased by NFI. NFI Cal Cartage has a long record of violating our labor, employment, and tax laws. The DLSC, the Labor Commissioner, the EDD, Cal OSHA, the National Labor Relations Board, all of these agencies have investigated Cal Cartage NFI and found violations. In January, LA's own city attorney filed unfair competition lawsuits against 3 of Cal Cartage's port trucking companies. And most recently in May, the LA City Council, led by Councilmember Buscaino, revoked Cal Cartage's Foreign Trade Zone operating agreement due to the record of violations. This is a company that has benefited from over $25 million in clean truck subsidies, both for trucks and fueling stations. So while the agenda item before us today does not explicitly state who Daimler will partner with to demo the port drayage trucks, we're concerned by press reports last week that reported that NFI and Daimler have entered into an agreement to pilot zero-emissions trucks. So we'd like to ask today who the fleet partners will be on the project, and if NFI is in fact Daimler's proposed fleet partner, we urge you to deny the receipt of any subsidy dollars unless they come into full compliance with all of our laws, especially labor and employment laws given their track record. And whoever the partners are, we strongly urge you to include conditions on these and future agreements that these public subsidy dollars only go to law-abiding companies. Our tax dollars should not go yet again to subsidizing indentured servitude. Thank you. And I brought copies. I have copies of the USA Today report and also the LA City Council motion. So I can, to the clerk, I don't know, who should I give this to? Bring those up.
Rosemary? I don't need to call your name. You can come up to the vacant microphone if you see you're next in line.
Mr. Chairman, when we get a chance, I'd like our staff to respond to that prior speaker. Sure. on the fleet identification.
Before Ms. Rosemary speaks, would you like to respond?
So as part of this award, in addition to working with Daimler, who would be building the trucks, we'll also be working with Penske and NFI. And I'm going to have Dr. Misato talk about the work that we would be doing through Penske and NFI, as well as perhaps you can touch on the infrastructure aspect, Dr. Misato.
Yes, so the speaker is correct. Daimler did make an announcement a couple of weeks ago that they're working with Penske and NFI. I do want to clarify that NFI in this particular demonstration project will be demonstrating the trucks out of their Chino facility, which is run and operated by NFI, not Cal Cartage. So we understand there is concerns about Cal Cartage in Wilmington. This is not actually being operated by that same fleet. So although NFI does own Cal Cartage, it's not actually being run. Cal Cartage is not involved in this project.
Thank you. I do want to mention also that California Resources Board and the state is moving more and more strongly toward pure electric heavy-duty trucks and electrification of the ports of LA and Long Beach. And so this money that is being attributed to this cause is really important as we move in that direction. For heavy-duty electric trucks, we need to know how many batteries need to be on board, what their weight is, how far the truck can go, what kind of charging is needed. And this will be a pilot project to help determine some of those questions that we face as we move more and more toward electrification of our drayage trucks. So overall, this is a great program. I am concerned about the labor issues. I hope our staff will be paying attention to that. But we recognize that with our air quality management plan, we must move toward electrification of the ports. Incentives for truck turnover is the way we will do that. We recognize that our small fleet owners cannot purchase these trucks without incentive monies to help them get there. So those are the issues that we face. And as I said, CARB is moving ever and ever more strongly toward pure electrification at our ports. So this is a good program.
And Mayor, I would just add that as we look at the technical aspects of the performance features and the infrastructure and the cargo capacity and carrying ability, we can also make sure within our agreements that we're addressing some of the legal concerns that are being raised. And Mr. Gilchrist can speak to the contractual aspect.
So one of the things that we can do in the contracts would be to require that the recipients of the vehicles be in compliance with federal, state laws. And we can look to see whether any of them have been adjudicated to have been in violation of labor laws and things like that, such as the lease to own within the previous several years, to try to make sure that we're not rewarding that type of behavior, but also to make sure that we're protecting ourselves from potential liability from issues that might arise from those types of arrangements.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Since we're on the subject, I'd like to raise
Right.
some questions. So I do have some concerns, and it's unfortunate that Councilmember Busciani isn't here. We did hear from him in committee, and none of these issues came up at the time. But my understanding is that Daimler and NFI have acquired Cal Cartage, and as it's noted that NLRB had a complaint issued April 27, 2018, that includes violation of labor law that occurred since the change in ownership. So that tells me that there hasn't been any, perhaps, dramatic changes in terms of respecting our labor laws. So I personally don't feel comfortable at this time until I have a conversation with Councilmember Busciani, who also issued a statement and motion to the LA City Council pointing out these labor relations violations with Cal Cartridge, and they're a part of this, so I just don't feel comfortable in supporting a company that has several alleged but also violations that are still
Madam
pending.
Supervisor, why don't we finish taking the testimony of those who came today,
Sure.
and then we'll refer it back to
Committee?
Councilmember Buscaino's committee, so you two can chat about it, and then we'll bring it forward in September.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just, is there any urgency on this issue as far as timing goes?
Thank you for the discussion. I think that the urgency is that we are 5 years from our attainment date for the federal standards, and we want to get, this is the first major original equipment manufacturer that we've been able to engage for a full electric truck. So it can certainly wait another month while we sort these issues out, which I
Actually,
think
be
is
2 months.
probably the most comfortable.
Actually,
Or
be
2 months, that's right. Sorry, Dr. Burke, because we're dark in August. But we'd love to get started as soon as possible. I also want to point out that the fleet itself is not receiving a benefit. They're actually running the truck to accumulate data for the original equipment manufacturer, Daimler. So they're not receiving an incentive. It's really for the original truck manufacturer to acquire data.
And Dr. Burke, it's actually 3 months because we're dark in August. It would go back to committee in September, and then from September it would go back before the board in October.
Well, Buscaino could have a special board meeting so that it isn't delayed that long.
When does this board?
So Mr. Gilchrist was also asking me that same question, and I guess we actually could go July. So then it would just be September, right?
Yeah, if we were to push it over to the July Stationary Source Committee, which I believe is 2 weeks from today,
That's fine.
or Tech Committee, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Tech Committee, and
I don't
then,
think anybody would have any objection to that. Does anybody have any objection to that?
and Mr. Chair, then the options would be to either go to September or to have a special board meeting before September if you felt there was an urgency.
If the chairman of the committee asked me for a special board meeting, I would definitely consider that. Okay. I'm sorry for you to be standing there that long.
No worries.
You know, please state your name for the record.
Good morning, AQMD board members. My name is Rosemary Zayas, and I'm an environmental justice youth activist. As a community member, I think it's really important for me to understand what's going on in my own backyard, in my neighborhood, as well as surrounding communities. And as well for my work as a youth organizer with Communities for a Better Environment, I know the importance of having to have a clean environment, healthy communities, and good jobs. So it is necessary to push for better environmental regulations, especially when talking about the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. But we should not have to choose between good and healthy jobs, or a good and healthy environment versus good jobs. So regarding agenda item number 4 that is before you today, I believe that although it is a step in a good direction to move towards zero emission trucks, I also find it necessary to support workers. Many community members work at the ports as truck drivers or as warehouse workers, and many struggle to make ends meet. Port truck drivers and warehouse workers at NFI Cal Carthage have shared their stories of wage theft, safety violations, inadequate working conditions, and discrimination practices. Taxpayer subsidies is our money, and I do not believe that it should go to companies like NFI Cal Carthage, but it should instead go to responsible companies that follow the law, not those who break it. And I also wanted to add that I will be joining the AQMD Young Leaders Advisory Council later this month, so I really hope to continue having these important discussions in order to reach a just community for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. McAllister? And would Celine Perez come to the other vacant microphone?
Good morning, members of the AQMD board. My name is Don McAllister, and I have a startup company by the name of Electric Vehicle Network. And I'm here to do a couple things. One is to support the proposed test program between Daimler and the ports to try to move the ports and the state towards zero-emission vehicles. Also wanted to just alert the board that my company has innovated a 30-second battery swapping system, and we spent the last year with the Samueli School of Engineering in Irvine redesigning the system and preparing it for a market entry. We have signed expressions of interest from the State Fleet of California, and the LAPD as well. Thank you to Board Member Mitchell as well for that introduction. And reason for being here this morning was to ask, on a no-fee basis, we're planning a demonstration of one electrified Class 8 semi in the port area. And due to the 30-second battery swap system, it will be basically an unlimited range electric semi that can run essentially nonstop 24 hours a day. The truck will also be able to haul 5,000 pounds more freight per run than comparably to for example, a Tesla, because what we do is we just use a battery about half the size of the batteries for trucks that they're planning to plug in. So we wanted to alert you that we're asking for an equal chance for us to conduct our test in that area and share the data with the port, with the state of California, as well as Daimler and the others. I'd like to show this up. This is a battery cell from LG Chem, who's our battery supplier. This is called a 21700 battery cell, and it's greater energy density than the battery cells coming out of the Gigafactory. It's 267 kilowatt hours per kilogram. And this is the battery that we will be using and we passed a 2-year screening process with LG for them to become our battery partner. In closing, I'd like to say electric semis on our electric vehicle network. Truck owners will be able to buy 2 for the price of 1 electric semi with a fixed battery. We use benign charging rates. We don't try to blast the batteries, and that's why our system is attractive to your first responders. The law enforcement, Camp Pendleton, has signed with us. Sorry, I'm running out of time, but we just want to let you know that we're a private, startup. I'm a former foster youth. I've been twice nominated to testify before the U.S. Congress for my previous endeavor, which is, okay, sorry. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I ask him a question?
Sure.
Mr. McAllister, I'm just curious, with your battery swap system for this in other countries in the Mideast, just under 30 seconds, where's the battery located in the vehicle? How do you do the swap so quickly in 30 seconds, and how did you design it that way?
It's the first, it was called by Magna the fastest, smallest, lowest costing battery swap system ever invented. It's a side loading design, so it's pure side load. The vehicle pulls up on one parking spot. On the next parking spot is a vending machine style module, rotisserie style, and we have 12 batteries on the big one. And so the vehicle pulls up, we extract the spent battery in 15, insert a fresh battery in 15, and you're gone. And the vehicles are out working, hauling freight, doing security patrols, moving people, instead of sitting on chargers.
And what's the length of the battery? How far can the vehicle go in?
We have 2 versions. The first version is approximately 6 by 4 by 5. It's low height, and it sits in the center of gravity of the vehicle. That's your SUV pickup class. The second one is about 8 by 4 by 20, so it's a bit bigger. It's almost 350 kW, and that's for your Class 8 semi.
And how far can a Class 8 semi go? 100 miles, 200 miles?
It's unlimited range within the service area, sir.
But on that battery, how far can it go?
Unlimited service, unlimited range within the service area of our network of 30-second battery swapping stations.
So how far is that? 100 miles, 200 miles? No, you've got.
Depends on the service
area.
If
there was no service area there, how far could the battery go?
We don't put trucks on the road without a service area. Thank you very much.
Still didn't answer the question, but that's okay. And following up on that, Matt, what do you know about this company, about this technology? And the question I had on number 4, what's the state in the industry? We're talking about heavy-duty trucks, batteries, range. Tesla mentioned, we know last year they talked about the large truck. BYD's coming out with a lot of trucks. We're talking about Daimler Chrysler. What's the technology in the industry? What's Europe doing?
So thank you for the question. So we've met with Don and looked at his technology when they were proposing it for a small SUV. This is the first I've heard for a Class 8 truck, so I'd be happy to investigate further, especially if they are working with UC Irvine and the School of Engineering there for some identification. But as you know, we need to reach our attainment and turn over about 200,000 trucks in a short amount of time. And so the real key is to get the original equipment manufacturers, the truck manufacturers that can produce at scale. Daimler Trucks is the largest truck manufacturer in the world, and to get them involved, this is the first time we've been able to get them engaged with the electric truck proposal in over 10 years we've been trying. So to have the largest truck manufacturer finally engage is somewhat of an accomplishment. We'd love to get them engaged further and accelerate their progress. But that's the intent of the project. They'll be looking at what battery size and capacity makes sense in terms of not only range, but also charging infrastructure, as Executive Officer Nastri mentioned, and then also cost benefit, right? So they need to have an ROI within a certain amount of time, and so they don't want to overproduce or put too much battery on. They need to have it in the sweet spot in order to make sure the costs are low and the weight is low. So that's part of the project. They're just going to collect just a huge amount of data.
Thanks.
Ms. Ferez?
Okay. Good morning. My name is Celine Perez. I'm the co-director of the Warehouse Worker Resource Center. I'm here to encourage you to take a stand and make sure that subsidies only go to law-abiding companies. It is concerning if NFI is indeed a partner on this project with Daimler, as NFI has a horrendous track record of breaking the law, not just at the Port of LA, but in the Inland Empire, including the Chino facilities, with their warehouses, as well as with the misclassified drivers. Just as warehouse workers and truck drivers are important to the supply chain and are linked, so are warehouses and drivers in the Inland Empire connected to the Port of LA and Long Beach. And NFI, as a Warehouse Worker Resource Center, we started working with warehouse workers in the Inland Empire. We saw the violations of health and safety, retaliation for workers standing up for their rights, where in the Inland Empire, NFI at the different warehouses were cited by CalOSHA repeatedly in violations that even equaled up to over $400,000. The same thing when several years ago we went to the Port of LA to see warehouses out there, the same things we saw in terms of violations, including NFI Cal Cartage, where even just last month, again, they were cited by CalOSHA for having forklifts that didn't have functioning brakes, which is a repeated violation where they've been cited over $100,000 on that facility, where there's been repeated wage theft that continues to this day, where they've also been given judgments, complaints by the National Labor Relations Boards for retaliation. So again, based off of this, we do think that NFI should not receive any subsidies in this project. And again, that these subsidies should go to law-abiding companies. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Councilmember Robertson, do you have a comment?
Well, just a question for staff, and I think this just get you to reiterate again. So is there a subsidy that's going to any of these trucking companies that would be just demonstrating this? Sounds like NFI is the one that Daimler is working with, but is there a subsidy there?
There is no subsidy going to NFI.
Okay, and then as you mentioned, the NFI is a really big company, so they purchased Cal Cartage, I think, a year ago or something like that. They may still be even in the process. I don't know where that's going, but this is an inland location, so it wouldn't be the Cal Cartage facility that would be impacted. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I was just trying to look for the minutes from the Technology Committee meeting where we talked about this, but I recall that Councilmember Buscaino actually had some very positive comments. He was saying that this is exactly what we need to be doing. As Mr. Miyasota mentioned, we've been trying to engage with Daimler for about 10 years. They're one of the largest engine manufacturers in this space, and they're one that we need to work with. We need to move forward with as quickly as possible. So, based on all that, I feel like we really should move forward with this today. I don't want to wait a couple of more months. I don't think that it makes sense. I understand all the concerns. I think there's a really good conversation that we need to have about where grants are going to be spent and what requirements we're going to have for those. But in this particular case, we're just talking about Daimler finding a partner who can test these trucks out on the road, and they're looking for a scalable company that can put enough of them out there and that can provide that reliable data back to Daimler so that we all can get that information and move forward. As Councilmember Mitchell mentioned, it's exactly what we're trying to do. We want to see electrification as quickly as we possibly can. We have attainment that we need to meet. On top of that, attainment's attainment, but what we really want to do is try to reduce emissions as quickly and as significantly as we possibly can. And we know that from a tailpipe perspective, electrification is one of those ways that we're going to be able to do that in the best way. So, I don't want to delay over an issue that I understand there's a lot of discussion about, but I just don't think that that particular issue applies to this particular agenda item. I think that it's a very important conversation to have for future agenda items, but I don't think that it really applies here because of the fact that, again, we're not talking about subsidies and we're not talking about that specific facility that there's some concerns about. And so I would like to see us move forward today if we can, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also wanted to mention that at the Technology Committee, Councilmember Buscaino was very enthusiastic about this program, and I also know how concerned he is about labor issues as well. The staff has assured us that they can handle any labor issues that might come up. This is a demonstration project, so it's not a situation where we're putting out a lot of money for truck drivers in incentive. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it's really going to be OEMs demonstrating 20 vehicles on pure electric, with pure electric capability. And I agree with Councilmember Robinson that we need to move ahead on this. The other issue is that I know we're seeking additional monies to reduce our participation, and we can anticipate that there will be additional monies on the street for zero-emission vehicles. This is coming out of CARB. The VW settlement money has put a lot of money towards zero-emission vehicles. And we didn't get so much for near zero. I made an attempt at CARB to get that, but the real emphasis at the state level is for zero-emission vehicles. So money will be on the street from VW settlement, as well as money from the cap and trade program that has just been approved and will come before the CARB board in the near future. So I would urge us to go forward. Time is important here. Zero emission in the ports is our first priority, and I think we can work out the labor issues with administratively through the staff participation.
Supervisor Solis?
Yes, I still want to hear not only from Councilmember Busciani, but also from our council, and I understand council is still reviewing this. So is that correct? Because this was, I think, just brought to our attention as well.
Sorry, could you repeat that one more time, Supervisor?
So I'm asking, I'd feel more comfortable if we had something with more clarity from you, from your office, on this particular item on the contract, because NFI is still owner. They've entered into ownership with this other firm, Cal Cartridge, who has these very serious violations. NFI is still the overseer. So I just want to make sure that whatever clarification we can get from county council by the next meeting could be helpful. I mean, I'm not in opposition to Daimler, Chrysler coming in and doing what they need to do. That's fine. It's just the partner. I want to make sure that that partner doesn't compromise us in any way, because if so, then I would just not vote for this item.
Supervisor, if I could, we don't have a specific requirement within the agreement for NFI or for Penske. And what I would propose is, based on what we've heard thus far, is that we continue to work with Daimler, that we do move forward, and we move forward in a way that allows us to make sure that the partners that they're selecting for the actual testing and deployment meet the conditions that we've heard you and others describe with regards to labor issues. And if NFI isn't the appropriate partner, we can continue to work with Daimler. But I think the key from the staff perspective, for all the reasons that we've heard, is to continue to move forward with a firm that can partner, that doesn't have these type of challenges associated with it. And if that would be acceptable, and I would ask council to weigh in on that as well.
That's something that we can.
Does that. Eric Nidros from Daimler is put in a speaker's card. Why can't we hear from the horse's mouth?
Thank you, Chairman Burke. My name is Eric Niandros. I am a consultant, and we have been working with Daimler to put forward this project and this application, so I appreciate the opportunity to speak here on behalf of Daimler Trucks. I obviously heard the conversation, didn't expect there to be such conversation today, but I'm glad I'm here to be a part of it. I would urge the time sensitivity here is something that Daimler is trying to put these trucks, some of them on the road by the end of this calendar year, which is a extraordinarily fast and important goal in terms of sending market signals to other OEMs. and Daimler really, truly believes in electric transportation all the way up to the CEO who is leading this project himself. So we would just add a sense of time sensitivity here to proceed and move the project forward. I certainly understand and respect all the discussion around the labor and the challenges, and I would put forward that hopefully that can be worked out in the forthcoming month or two, and if that can be done satisfactorily, great. Of the 20 trucks being proposed, a majority of them are going to Penske. A minority would go to NFI. So if that had to change in some way due to the ongoing issues here, perhaps that's a solution. But and to reiterate, the funds would go to Daimler to build and deliver these trucks. The fleet partners are there to drive and test and provide feedback. They actually will not own the assets. Daimler will retain ownership of these trucks. They will come back to them after the testing program. So there's no subsidy necessarily going to the fleet partners here. They're providing, frankly, in-kind support through providing the drivers and time and resources on the project. And these are all going to be employee-based drivers at NFI that would be behind the wheel. So happy to answer any other questions, but wanted to just add that element of time sensitivity given the very, very tight schedule that has been developed in anticipation of support and being able to move this forward expeditiously here in the balance of 2018.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Councilmember Cacchiotti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think there's a way we can reconcile this with the supervisor's concerns. Bay, maybe as part of this negotiating with Daimler, we can incorporate some type of provision as you choose the fleets that expressing the board's concerns, as especially Supervisor Solis and other board members have indicated today, but at the same time moving forward to reach our clean air goals, because it's, as Matt said, boy, this is incredible. We've been trying to deal with the police, the fire, these large OEMs, and knocking their heads into the wall for 10 years. This is incredible advancement, but we've got to put some provision on how you incorporate it in there that maybe it's not legally binding, but here's an expression of concern by the board, especially Supervisor Solis and others, of these labor violations and practices that we don't advocate and we're concerned about. And some language is just, I'm not sure what legal authority we'd have, but we've got to move forward, but expressing that concern in a provision within this agreement. Is it possible?
Definitely. We can do several things. We could report back to Tech Committee in September with the language that we're intending to use or are using. But the other thing that I wanted to mention to the board is that with respect to, because this is more of a test type of project, it's not subsidies money that's going directly to the entities with the potential labor violations. With respect to when we award our Carl Moyer funds or our 1B funds, we are beginning the process to look into whether or not those entities that we will be considering awards for have those types of issues. We've started that process, and we are working forward to address those issues going forward, both for the issue of wanting whether or not we want to work with those types of entities, but also in terms of protecting us as an agency from ramifications of legal actions that might come about from drivers who are driving too much and things like that. And if there's questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them.
Mr. Chairman, just
who was it? Yes.
I just wanted to ask a question of council, and I heard staff earlier say that the larger percentage of the work would go to Penske. So what percentage would go to NFI, and can't we maybe move forward? I don't know if you can do this legally, but I'm just saying until we hear that we get the right information about NFI. If it's true, then, perhaps we lay that out clearly. But I think if Penske is fine and they have a larger percentage, I want to know what that is and what NFI's is. So can someone elaborate on that?
Thank you, Supervisor. The current plan is that of the 20 trucks, Penske would get 15 and NFI would be driving 5. So if that needed to shift in some way, I think that would be acceptable.
So that's important to know information, since someone already alluded to the fact that we're 5 years behind on this plan. If 15 trucks gets us somewhere, I'm open to that, but I don't know if we can bifurcate this or how we do that, if that's even possible.
It sounds like to me that if there was an issue, that we confirmed that there was an issue with NFI, that we could send all 20 trucks to Penske, is my understanding.
Is that?
If we weren't able to resolve the NFI issues, then 20 trucks could go to Penske and run them in a similar environment to get the data and continue to accelerate the development of the technology, for sure.
Well, I'd want to know legally. I'm not a lawyer, but
Yeah, there would be no legal prohibitions on doing that.
Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to move approval of agenda item number 4 with the conditions that we've talked about here today, which would be that our staff work out the labor issues, and in the event that the issues cannot be worked out with NFI, that the entire truck fleet be arranged with Penske.
Second.
Dr. Parker would like to speak to the motion.
I haven't heard anyone say exactly what the labor issues themselves really are. Are they basically issues and stuff about length of time of driving, wages that are paid, independent drivers versus employee drivers? I heard the gentleman from Daimler state that all of these people are going to be employees and not necessarily independent drivers. And from that standpoint of view, if none of those dollars themselves, these companies are going to be putting out their own dollars, then are we really saying that whoever is going to be driving them, certainly appears to me that we should be able to put some kind of restrictions or limitations on what they can or cannot do, who can or cannot drive these particular trucks. And I think that puts us in the position that we are then looking out for the appropriateness itself of dealing with companies that are going to follow the rules. The reason I ask that question, because I know that under many circumstances existing today, a lot of these companies are getting hit with what they call it, private attorneys, ramifications, et cetera, of whether or not their time cards show the number of hours that they still have left for sick leave, or how many hours have they used. Not necessarily there's a violation, because the law itself says that those things themselves must be on their paycheck, but it's not that they haven't been able to get the right kind of dollars. So I think that we are kind of getting into a situation on a basis itself of making sure that we really are dealing with reputable companies, but also making sure that we don't restrain ourselves to the extent that there may be administrative violations versus then programmatic versus something of substantive meaning. And if we can put that kind of language, as Mrs. Mitchell stated, into the agreement, that we have the right itself to say who's going to basically be driving these vehicles in order for us to participate. I think that could solve a lot of the problems and not get us in the middle of trying to run the companies on a day-to-day basis, but making sure that we are following basic prudent business practices.
Yes, Dr. Parker, the basic issue relates to lease-to-own agreements where the drivers are engaging in lease-to-own contracts, so they're essentially leasing the trucks. And the allegations are that the amount that they need to pay to lease those trucks results in them having to work more hours than they are legally allowed to work, and or that they are essentially putting so much money towards these trucks that they're not able to make a decent wage. So those are the issues. It's the lease-to-owns, and we can look into or prohibit lease-to-own issues with respect to these trucks. So we could we could contract that out to ensure that we always have documentation, and we could, even do inspections if that was something that the board wanted to try to ensure that. But the lease to own issue is something that we intend to look forward and address going forward with the Carl Moyer, the Prop 1Bs, and the other times when we issue funds for clean vehicles.
Councilmember Cacchiotti? No? Okay, Ms. Mitchell, do you have any further comment?
So I have a motion on the floor, so I'd like.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Mr. Nastri?
Oh, Mr. Nastri wants to speak.
Thank you. I would ask if you would consider that with regards to implementing the contract, that we're not able to work it out with NFI, that we also have the ability to seek another vendor, and then if we can't find another suitable vendor, that we could then utilize Penske.
Yeah, I will amend my motion to make that accommodation.
Thank you.
I accept that amendment.
My final comment, since we have no further speakers, is that it's obviously no secret that in my past life I had a 20-year relationship with Daimler, and I met with the president of their North American corporation regularly, and I was familiar with their policies and all their executive staff. And in all my dealings with them, they were beyond impeccable. In fact, they were so impeccable it used to get on my nerves. But so this other company may have issues, and probably does. But I guarantee you, if Daimler bought them, they'll straighten them right out. And I I agree with Supervisor Solis that we need to find out about this. But I also agree with my colleagues that after trying to get these guys' attention for 10 years, I think we need to do both things at the same time. So I'll be supporting Ms. Mitchell's motion. With that being said, I'll open the roll. Close the roll. Motion passes 9-0. Okay, item number 5. There was a speaker for item number 5.
That was Mr. Etter.
But the machine ate him. For her.
Back.
It was what?
I believe that was Mr. Etter, Mr. Chair.
So
5, 7,
so
and
Harvey,
9.
Harvey got eaten, huh? Okay, how about 7?
That was
that
also
Mr.
Mr.
Etter
Etter.
also?
There's no more public comments on the
How about
consent
9?
calendar. That's it. That was Mr. Etter as well.
Okay, well, then I will take a motion on 5, 7, and 9.
I'll
Move
move
approval.
items 5, 7, 9.
Second.
Is there any opposition to those items? Hearing none, they are approved. Then we will go to 25?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I believe we need a motion on items 10 through 16,
I'm sorry, 10 or 16?
10 through 16.
because the first motion made today was Councilman Robinson confirmed it was items 1, 6, and 8.
Okay, well, I'll take a motion on 10 to 16.
Move approval. Second.
Any opposition? So that 10 to 16 is approved. Then how about 18 through 24?
Second.
Any opposition? Hearing none, that's approved. So then we get to 25.
Thank you, Dr. Burke, members of the board. This is Philip Fine. I'm the Deputy Executive Officer in the Planning and Rules Division here at AQMD. And I'm happy to present the result of many months of hard work on the initial implementation of AB 617. AB 617 was a bill that was signed by Governor Brown last year, and it really places a renewed focus on community air quality and improving the exposure of those disadvantaged communities within our state and within the South Coast Basin. South Coast has had a lot of work in this area in the past. We've had our EJ initiatives for over 20 years, but what this program does is renew our focus there, but also provide much needed resources to do a lot more than we've been able to do in the past. So there's a lot of elements of AB 617, and I've listed probably 5 of the largest elements here. It includes easier access to emissions data and monitoring data, best emission control requirements, clean technology investments like we've just heard about. But the first 2 major roles for the district are community air monitoring as well as community emission reduction plan development. And in order to do that, the first thing we need to do is identify and prioritize those communities. This program is an ongoing program. It is in state law, but there is no sunset date. So this will be a program that will address as many communities as we can in the coming years. Within the program, the California Air Resources Board has certain responsibilities, and the local air districts have certain responsibilities. And at the end of the day, the California Air Resources Board is the one that's going to do the final selection of communities. But we have asked, and CARB has agreed, that the local districts do the outreach, do the work on the ground. We are familiar with the communities within our areas in order to make these recommendations to CARB. So that's what brings us here today. Air Resources Board was likely to select maybe 5 to 10 communities statewide in the first year. We have about 40% of the state population, so on the high end of that, we are going to be recommending about 4 communities for their consideration. Once we do identify and prioritize these communities, the bulk of the work will be conducting community air monitoring programs in these communities and/or community emission reduction plans in these communities with the ultimate goal of cleaner air in those areas. As I mentioned, there's been an extensive public process. We presented a preliminary list of communities to Stationary Source Committee in April, and as well as at the board retreat in May. And we provided that list to Air Resources Board, that preliminary list. What you're going to see today was presented to Stationary Source Committee last month. And today we're seeking approval from the governing board such that we can submit this report to the Air Resources Board by the end of the month, and the Air Resources Board plans to take action by the end of September. There has been extensive outreach. This chart shows that we've had multiple meetings every month since February, both during work hours and on evenings and on weekends. We had 10 specific AQMD community meetings on AB 617, but we also had a technical workshop looking at the more technical elements of the prioritization. But in addition to that, we went to other community groups meetings, we went to other government agency meetings and academic institutions, and were able to talk about this program to anyone and anywhere that would listen. Here's just some pictures from those meetings. They range from anywhere from a handful of people to over 100 people at a couple meetings. And we did it in a format where we had breakout sessions where we were able to engage in a small group dialogue to get feedback on how we proceed. So we received input from the community, and one of the things we asked for are what are the concerns in your community that we should be looking at. So it was the typical things we hear: air pollution sources such as freeways and trucks and warehouses, rail yards, diesel equipment. There's also some concern over oil production, wells and refineries, as well as some of the waste, hazardous waste issues such as landfills, scrap yards. A lot of concern about schools that were near air pollution sources or near freeways or near businesses that emit toxics. Areas that have a concentration of industries with historical land use issues where residents live very nearby, and an interest in green spaces. And then we also asked what kind of population factors should we look at in looking at these disadvantaged communities. And there's a whole list here from socioeconomic factors to other pollution burdens. The community was generally supportive that we use the technical tools that we have at our disposal. You're familiar with the multiple air toxic exposure study that we conduct here at AQMD. This places an emphasis on toxic cancer risk, and it really points out that diesel is 2/3 of the risk, so it's very heavily diesel weighted. But it does look at all pollution sources, whether mobile or stationary. We also have a statewide tool called CalEnviroScreen that not only looks at diesel PM, but also ozone and PM 2.5. It looks at other pollution burdens in the communities, such as water issues and hazardous waste issues. But it also includes population factors, whether it's different health outcomes in communities that might make them more susceptible to air pollution, but also socioeconomic factors that are listed here. And these align with a lot of what we heard in the community of the kinds of factors we should be looking at. We also heard from the community that they were very concerned about schools that were near industrial zones or near freeways and daycare centers and preschools. So we developed a new tool in-house that looks at that proximity of schools to industrially zoned areas and freeways and use that as an additional factor in our prioritization. We wanted to take a very systematic approach to this, so we did it in a tiered, stepwise approach. The first step, which I already mentioned, was broadly inclusive, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about each of these steps as we go forward, so I won't go into details here, but at the end of the day, in step 5, it results in about 4 communities represented for our first year of implementation, and then a list of about 14 more that were kind of the 2 to 6 year implementation schedule. So the first step was broadly inclusive, and again, this was more or less the list that we brought to the board back in April and May. So any community that was in the top 25% of our air toxic cancer risk within the basin, or any community that was in the top 25% of their CalEnviroScreen score statewide, or any community that nominated themselves for any reason, or communities that came out very high in our new metric of schools near industrial zones and freeways. When we looked at that, we came up with about 55 or so communities, and they're shown right here. The boundaries were developed more or less based somewhat on geographical regions, but also some political boundaries like city and county lines, but also common air pollution problems. But again, these lines, once we go to the communities, once we hear about their concerns, we can adjust these as we move forward with the program. Step 2 was the metrics that worked really well for the South Coast Basin may not work as well for the Coachella Valley, because there's different issues out there that may not be reflected in these other metrics, and there's also some lack of data out there. So we decided that we would separate them. There is the Eastern Coachella Valley in the Indio area, which we know is a disadvantaged community. We know we have air quality concerns, so we want to treat them separately. There's several monitoring efforts just getting started out there that we're involved with, so we're going to consider them in the coming, in the midterm, 2 to 6 years. But everyone else outside of the Coachella Valley was still in consideration in step 2 in the basin. In step 3, what we did was we said, okay, we're going to take the most disadvantaged communities in CalEnviroScreen, the top 5%, and then also look at MATES to make sure that the CalEnviroScreen scores weren't driven by a hazardous waste issue or a water issue. We still wanted to make sure there was at least an air issue that we can address within the program. This resulted in about 33 communities through this step. That's still too many we could do in the first year or in the first several years of the program. So we wanted to evaluate additional factors in that implementation schedule. So we looked again at that metric with schools near industrial areas or freeways. We looked again at past or current monitoring studies for which we already have information that will help us move forward quickly. We also looked at past or current plans or programs that are community-based that were reducing emissions. And we also looked at the self-nominations and the ability to partner and have a broad-based community support within the community. With that, we looked at those 4 additional factors, and if you had 2 or more additional factors, we put you kind of in the year 1 to 5 or 1 to 6. And even if you only had one of those factors, but it was a self-nomination, we also included that. So that's about 8 years. And the remaining 15 communities are still on our list, but they may be a little bit longer term, perhaps 6 years and beyond. With that, we still have about 18 communities, however, or 17 communities in the basin. However, again, we still need to prioritize first year, first 5 or 6 years. So we have a very short time frame for implementation. Monitoring by state law is supposed to begin by July of next year. Plans are going to be due by the end of next year. This is very tight. So we wanted to look at communities for the first year for which we have a head start. So communities where we already have existing or past monitoring, communities where we have past plans, such as our Clean Communities Plan, where we know we have partnerships already in place and resources from local agencies and local organizations that we can work with quickly, but also geographical diversity and a wide range of air pollution issues, because these first communities are going to serve as a model going forward for the future. So with that, we settled on recommending these 4 communities. So one community is that Wilmington West, Long Beach, Carson area. Obviously, a lot of industry down there, refineries, as well as the port traffic. We have a lot of MITES 5 monitoring efforts ongoing and just kicking off there that will we can build on very nicely for this program. We have an area in East Los Angeles, unincorporated area in Boyle Heights. We had our Clean Communities Plan that we implemented several years ago. We have those partnerships. There's still good work to do there. Also for San Bernardino, near the rail yard, we have similar past work that we can build upon. And then a 4th community we added, already has a MATES 5 monitoring site. There's already been some work with LA County in the Florence Firestone area, so we thought we could build upon that in this area that encompasses Southgate and Huntington Park, but also some unincorporated LA County areas like Florence Firestone. I have an asterisk there because it's as resources allow. These are going to be very intensive, expensive programs. And as we were developing this, we were also working with the legislature to get funding, which I think we were fairly successful in getting $50 million this year statewide to implement the program. But as yet, CARB has not divided that funding up amongst districts. So that's why we have the asterisks to ensure that we have appropriate funding. Just a little more detail on the different areas. I won't go into details. This is more for the audience and your information. But an area like Wilmington, West Long Beach, and Carson obviously have the challenges that everyone recognizes. They're very top of the list in MATES 4 and very high in Cal and Virus Screen. We received a lot of nominations from these areas. For East Los Angeles and Boyle Heights, again, just dominated by these freeways east of downtown, a lot of industrial areas just north of the rail yards, a lot of previous air toxics monitoring, very high in MATES, very high in Cal and Virus Screen, and again, we received nominations. San Bernardino, again, building on a Clean Communities Plan, the rail yard with some of the highest risk in the state. Not so high in MATES, but very high in Cal and Virus Screen, and again, received several nominations. And finally, this area, south and southeast of downtown, and again, it has an Alameda corridor, some very industrial areas there, very high in MATES, very high in Cal and Virus Screen, had the highest score in school proximity to industrial areas and freeways, and CBE submitted a nomination for this one. So the next steps is we're seeking board approval of these recommendations. We have a report that we've included in the package. It needs a little more technical information added just to support these recommendations, as well as some additional information on some of the communities that we're going to be considering for years 2 and beyond. So we'd like to add a little bit of that, but then by the end of the month, CARB is asking for that final report. And then, as I mentioned before, in September, CARB will be considering that statewide strategy. So happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from Mr. Fine? I have one. Supervisor Solis.
Yeah, I want to thank staff. I think this was a really great exercise, and I had a lot of questions in terms of how things were determined, but I think at least your top 4 or 5 communities are very well situated to receive this assistance. I'm just wondering about year 2 through 5 and 2-6. because you have potential listings there, and there seems to be some overlap with some of the areas like Long Beach and others. And I'm wondering if we can grow and extend that based on our own information that we have, that AQMD puts out regarding some of the smoggiest and potentially more particulate matter 2.5, like the San Gabriel Valley, thinking about places like El Monte, Ballin Park, that are also adjacent to the 605 freeway and also the rock quarries. So very bad air quality there. So just as something to look at in terms of the previous years. But I think this is a great report, and I'm very excited about the movement that you all are making on this effort. I did have a chance to run into Assemblymember Garcia and asked her how she's doing, and she mentioned that she obviously is very concerned about the focus along the 710, both the north and particularly the south portion of the freeway. So just want to commend staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments for Dr. Fine? We have Christopher Chavez and Mark Carell come to the open microphones.
Hi, my name is Chris Chavez. I am with the Coalition for Clean Air, and I'm also a resident of West Long Beach, so I took particular interest in this process. First, I'd like to express CCA's agreement with the nominations for Year 1 implementation of AB 617. These communities are among the most polluted in the South Coast Air Basin and are home to a large socioeconomically disadvantaged population. Additionally, these communities, as noted in the report, have existing programs and resources that AB 617 can complement. CCA also appreciates the report highlighting the role of community air monitoring programs, as well as community engagement with local organizations and partners. I would also like to commend AQMD staff for their hard work and dedication in reaching out to the community. CCA has attended most of these meetings, and which has stretched out from as far as San Fernando, Santa Ana, and San Bernardino. Lastly, I'd like to urge AQMD to consider the following. First, the Coalition for Clean Air strongly recommends adapting the community selection model created by the San Joaquin Valley's AB 617 Environmental Justice Steering Committee. The steering committee, which consisted of multiple environmental justice, health, and community organizations, conducted a very fair and thorough evaluation of multiple communities throughout the Central Valley. This process was collaborative and, most importantly, empowering of the local community. I would be happy to provide your staff a copy of their work so that you can examine what their process was. Secondly, I would encourage AQMD to develop a plan for incorporating the Replace Your Ride program into AB 617 efforts. While the staff report rightly focuses on heavy-duty mobile sources and stationary sources, transforming the light-duty fleet in these communities would also yield tremendous results in cleaner air for everybody. Thank you very much for your time.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members, Mark Carroll, President of Breathe, California of Los Angeles County. I wanted to express our support for the recommendations of staff. I think staff did a very comprehensive job in putting this list together. We're very pleased that the analysis included a look at the schools and daycare centers that were in close proximity to freeways. We're very concerned about exposure, not just emissions, but the exposure level of residents in communities, and we think that the communities listed and this analysis using this new factor to examine schools and daycare centers is extremely important. We do also, I concur with Mr. Chavez about his statement about including Replace Your Ride into the AB 617 program and utilizing that to encourage light-duty vehicle, the encouragement of light-duty vehicles in these communities. We think that that's also very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Dr. Liu?
Yeah, first I'd like to thank Mark Carroll for coming back to AQMD. Nice to see you back again, Mark. One, possible unintended consequence of AB 617, the way it was structured, is that it could pit communities against each other for funding, for monitoring, for risk reduction plans, for being prioritized and all that. And so that's a concern that I have, and there's probably no perfect way to address that. However, these 13 groups, environmental justice community groups, religious organizations, got together in the San Joaquin Valley, and they were just the advocacy organizations, and they developed their own criteria to identify and prioritize which communities they thought should go first in San Joaquin Valley. And they wrote about their process, and they produced a 53-page report that I shared with Wayne, and it was really impressive how they kind of created a bottom-up, ground-up way to build a consensus so they wouldn't be arguing amongst themselves on how to move forward. So I support where we ended up. I think it was a very good process that we went through, and I thought that we identified good communities, and I totally support moving forward with this and sending it off to the Air Resources Board for consideration. But I also think that we should at least explore the possibility of doing something that's less top-down. And perhaps what I will do is I will introduce staff to the woman who kind of organized what happened in San Joaquin Valley. You guys can have a conversation with her, maybe bring her down and meet with her and talk with her about how we might tweak our process in the future so that we can use something that not only asks communities to show up and participate in our work groups and meetings and so forth, but also gives them some sense of ownership and some role in the decision of how these communities are selected. And I think that would increase the number of folks who would actually show up to things like this where we make big decisions because they would have more buy-in. So I'll do that, and you guys can talk with her and see where it takes us.
And this was Genevieve?
Yes, Genevieve Gale.
So we had the chance to actually talk with Genevieve.
Oh, great.
And when I say we, I mean the Samir Sheikh from San Joaquin, myself, and the representative from Bay Area, Greg Nutt. And so we actually went through the process. And, I think we believe that we have both a bottom-up approach in terms of reaching out to the communities and working with them. I think where we probably differed was as a science organization, we used a lot of science in trying to identify the cities. And I think that at the end of the day, as you said, Dr. Liu, we all pretty much came to the same areas. And I think that's the important part.
Yeah, I think you'll see that their factors that they used were some of the same ones that we used,
Yep.
right? So they didn't ignore science
Right.
in doing that.
Right.
I think that what we might be able to do, and while we wouldn't necessarily do it ourselves, we would encourage the groups or facilitate the groups in coming together to try to go through a similar process. In the end, what I'm trying to avoid is maybe not this year, but next year, having communities from Riverside or Long Beach or, San Gabriel Valley or some places that weren't selected coming in and fighting amongst themselves, because that would be unproductive and actually could be, quite harmful to trying to move this process forward.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From the CARB perspective, because this came up on our agenda a week ago, and we did see from a number of communities that they have kind of marched ahead and moved forward with their plans. One thing that will be important, I think, as we move forward is that we do have good community involvement, because the plan envisions that any community that is part of the program will form a community steering committee. And so the EJ groups that we have in our communities now, we have a number of them, will certainly be instrumental in helping us form those community steering committees and beyond those committees. So this will be an important step forward. But we did see some of the communities from other air districts had already kind of formed their steering committees in anticipation of perhaps being picked. But even if they weren't picked, this year they could move forward with plans for subsequent years because, as we said, 617 does not sunset. and there will be other opportunities next year and the year after that and the year after that. So I think our staff did a good job in choosing these communities. I went to several of the community meetings and was pleased to see that some of our industry partners were also at those meetings, because it's important that we have industry and small businesses and those people involved as well. So I would be fully supportive of the staff recommendation here, and I'll move to support the staff recommendation.
Second.
Can't speak to a motion that didn't make a motion.
I'll withdraw
I
it. Let Michael do
I
it.
would ask whether or not Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell would be interested in moving this item.
Thank you. I will move this item according to the staff recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for knowing the rules.
Okay. We have a
And
motion.
knowing how to get around them.
Yeah, right. Joe jumped right in there to save you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any, clerk, open the roll. Got to get our money's worth on this voting machine. Item passes 10-0. Item 26.
Thank you, Dr. Burke. Members of the board, my name is Tracy Goss. I'm the Planning and Rules Manager. I have a real brief presentation regarding our proposed amendments today to Rule 1111. If you'll recall, Rule 1111 applies to residential and commercial furnaces. It regulates manufacturers, distributors, sellers, and installers. In March, we came to you, and this board adopted amendments to Rule 1111 that involved extending and increasing the mitigation fee for non-compliant furnaces. At that time, there was quite a bit of board discussion and a direction for us to come back with labeling requirements that would put out to the consumers that furnaces that they're buying are potentially not compliant with the rule, and that also there is a rebate program available to them. As a part of the process, we did work with stakeholders and went and sought their feedback. One of the major comments that we got from the stakeholders, mainly the manufacturers, is that the consumers don't see the label on the box or on the furnace itself. Where they would see that information is on their collateral material. So our new approach that we're bringing before you today is to have all that information for the consumers as a part of that collateral material. So effective October 1st, what we're proposing is that the manufacturers be required to identify for the consumer that the products do not meet, if they do not meet the 14 nanogram per joule requirement within the rule, and that that product is not eligible for the rebate program. As a part of that, we want them to put that material or that information on the consumer brochures, technical specification sheets, and then also on the manufacturer's website promoting the furnaces. We have specific language that we want them to include. As a part of that wording, we also are requiring them to reference the website for the Clean Air Furnace Rebate Program. I would like to highlight that we do have a provision that if one of the manufacturers would like to propose alternative language to that that's contained within the rule, there's a requirement that they submit that to us, and we'll have an opportunity to approve that alternative language. I would like to highlight that our rebate program did kick off on June 20th of this year. I'm happy to say that we're already beginning to get some traction with the rebate program. It provides a $500 rebate for the first 6,000 furnaces. We are looking to have 4 manufacturers with products available by the end of this year. With that, Mr. Chair, our recommendations is that you find that this proposal is exempt from CEQA and amend Rule 1111 to include these provisions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We have some speakers on this item. Mr. Eder, Rusty Thorpe, Dave Winningham, Ryan Tasha. Would Mr. Eder please come to the microphone? And would Mr. Thorpe come to the other available microphone?
Hello, I'm Harvey Eder. I'm speaking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition. Did sign up for number 25, and you've already voted on that, and that's been decided, but didn't get a chance to have input. Basically, natural gas, it's dirty, toxic gas. And that's what's being pushed here. This is bad stuff. And, you know, they're requiring that new buildings in 2020 built have solar on them. But there is the state to retrofit with best available retrofit control technology. And this lends itself, first of all, solar photovoltaics, you're getting efficiencies, the high end of 20 to 25%. Thermal, you get efficiencies of like 70 to 90%. But then you've got to convert them into electricity through a turbine and whatnot, and you got the efficiencies there. So anyway, and then there's the life cycle cost and storage, and there's a lot of stuff that's being done through DOE and Sunshot with storage, and this could be done instead of the rush to electricity. In the old days, we used to say, well, there's quality of electricity makes a difference. To try to match like a low temperature solar thermal versus using electricity, which you can run your computer or your vehicle on. Anyway, so district heating and cooling systems have been around for a long time. There's a lot of new technologies. There is thermal storage that's used for high temperature and should be brought into the district as well. We had the Luz plants of 350 megawatts of thermal storage built by an Israeli company. Anyway, this stuff, this should not be passed. It's bad karma, and it's consistent with the approach and whatnot that the district and state is taking and using gas. It's been, in the last 3 years, in the world, there's been more money spent, like $300 billion and more on solar, basically, and wind. The sun makes the wind blow, the water flow, and the plants grow. We've got a lot of new people on here. Didn't get to say this for quite a while. It's the engine of our ecosystem. It's the way the world works. Any questions or whatnot?
Any questions for Mr. Eder? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Thorpe?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chairman Burke, and good morning, board, to all. My name is Rusty Tharp. I'm Director of Regulatory Affairs for Goodman Manufacturing. We appreciate the opportunity to comment. Goodman is very proud to be one of only 3 manufacturers in the final draft staff report to have certified a compliant product, and the first to have certified a condensing furnace. I'm here to communicate Goodman's support for staff's proposed revision to Rule 1111. We support the proposed revisions for 3 very important reasons. First is the proposed changes mandate information on documentation where it will be much more likely be seen by consumers prior to purchasing the furnace, and doesn't needlessly mandate information on product labels, which are typically not seen by most consumers. Second, the proposed changes further advantage compliant products over non-compliant products. Third, the proposed changes give appropriate education to the consumer of the rebate program prior to purchasing the furnace. We reiterate previous comments that the furnaces are typically not purchased in retail stores, but instead are typically purchased at the kitchen table, with the consumer typically only seeing the literature from the manufacturer and or information from the local heating and air conditioning contractor. And then also, as we've also stated previously, as most furnaces in this area are installed in attics, they're typically not seen by many consumers. We thank you for your time and support and appreciate all the hard work of the staff.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'm Dave Winningham with Lennox International.
Lennox is an American-based company manufacturing products that compete in the furnace market subject to Rule 1111. We currently have a portfolio of products, both non-condensing and condensing, available in the market today. Lennox fully supports the Rule 1111 amendment that requires furnace manufacturers to notify consumers on brochures, tech specs, and their website information. While we support the current proposal and continue to invest in low-emission furnace products, it's come to our attention that there is an attempt to further extend the mitigation period by allowing a sell-through period. I do not see that that was brought forward today, and will reserve future comment, but Lennox does not support that issue.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Mr. Teschner.
Good morning, everyone. Ryan Teschner, Product Manager for Remanufacturing. And just want to say that we support the proposal that will require furnace manufacturers to notify consumers on all consumer brochures, technical specifications, and manufacturer's website that the unit is not subject to mitigation fees and/or is eligible for the Clean Air Furnace Rebate Program. Similarly, we've heard comment about extending new amendments and changes. So REAM recommends that South Coast Governing Board approve the amendment and not consider further changes. We are already on an abbreviated timeline regarding the launch of our new compliant products and seek finalization of the proposal. That way we can move forward in certainty. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'd like to move the item as proposed by staff.
Is there any opposition to this item? Hearing none, this item is approved. Item 27 has been withdrawn. That's it. So we go to public comment. Mr. Eder?
I can find Harvey's violation if I keep voting against him. I think you should ask what the procedure is, at least. Okay. Just so we know.
Mr. Chair, just real quick, since that was a public hearing, I think it'd probably be good if we actually took a vote rather than just no opposition on item 26.
Okay.
It's going to be unanimous. There's no opposition, but I just think it's
probably...
probably...
Would the clerk open the roll? No problem.
So,
would the clerk open the roll? You know I love using the voting system. I'm just sorry Mike Antonovich is gone.
We can tell him. He's still around.
Yeah, I'm having lunch with him next week.
Let him know.
Passes 10-0.
Thanks for the indulgence.
No problem. No problem. Mr. Eder?
Hello, I'm Harvey Eder. I'm speaking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition. I'm those that want to see solar conversion as soon as possible. It looks like, SB 100's going to pass. Maybe it won't. It'll be like by 2045, 100% solar renewables in the state. The numbers are bad. The district's numbers, I keep on repeating this over and over again. On August 12th, our comments on the draft plan from 16 took the numbers that Dr. Aaron Katzenstein, who's now head of the lab and was working on this, that there's been over a 30% increase in methane, CH4, over the last 12 years. And the new numbers, the district and the state had used 20 to 25 global warming potential compared to carbon dioxide. And the new numbers are 84 and 86 global warming potential. Instead of looking at it over a 100-year period, it's over a 20-year period because it lasts 12 and a half years in the atmosphere. And, vegetarians will say, oh, it's because of, cattle feed yards and this kind of thing. well, the ice is melting in the north. The real numbers, the numbers that you folks in CARB are using is 450 parts per million CO2 equivalent. The real numbers are almost double that. And this was put into comments on the plan on August 12th, and there was no response to that or other studies about solar with sunshot and whatnot evaluated by the district. We still have this question about litigation. I've expanded it to about 12 folks that have legal licenses, and have filed complaints with the presiding judge and the supervising judge, and also going to the Judicial Council. The judge said that there was nothing said in his final, was his preliminary, about solar energy in the 12 case on technology forcing. And it's about technology forcing for BACT. He kept on saying, well, this is issues of law I deal with, not policy. It's just, it's ignorance. I mean, I don't see how he could be practicing judging with that kind of approach anyway. I'm very concerned about this. We need new numbers. On the advice of staff, I did talk with this fellow, Jesse Torres, with business and economics, and trying to work with him to do something quicker. Anyway, any questions, anything?
Any questions for Mr. Etter? No questions, Mr. Etter. Thank you for your testimony.
One of the things that board member Mitchell said that she, in a meeting of the minister, there was a committee that she had contact with Tesla, and I thought you said that. Anyway, I was interested in following up on that and trying to find out. All right, thank you.
Florence, you with you? I don't see you. Where are you? There you are. I didn't see you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for talking with me today. Florence Garibian with the Del Amo Action Committee. I want to talk about a longstanding issue, Rule 1410, the hydrofluoric acid issue, and mention some comments that came up in the last work group meeting. First of all, I want to say that I don't want the AQMD to forget that your mission is to clean the air and protect the public health of the residents in the South Coast Air Quality Management District. This is not a matter of the number of people who testify or the identification of organizations testifying and the number of people that show up at public meetings. That is not a basis for the determination of public health considerations. As we all know, HF is an extremely dangerous chemical. I also want to say that the Del Amo Action Committee is opposed to taking this rule out of the rule process and putting it in an MOU process, in spite of the reassurances that I received in the meeting that this could be an MOU process, could be a public process. My third comment is that I would like to ask, I understand that the Air District inspectors do a number of inspections at the refineries very frequently. I would like to ask that on the next inspections that are done at the Valero and the Torrance refinery, a focus be given to the safety measures that are already in place at the refineries. A particular concern to me is the rapid acid transfer process that moves this dangerous chemical into other temporary storage containers in the event of an emergency. I would like specifically for the district inspectors to take a look at how that whole process would work and would it be effective. Another comment that I have is that it would be interesting to review the US EPA Emergency Response Group's inspection and their finding of deficiencies to ensure that those corrections have been made. Also, I asked some questions about where the refineries, what are the producers of this HF material, where are they located, et cetera. And I was told that that appeared to be a very unreasonable question. I don't really understand why the district shouldn't know where the refineries are getting the HF. And as a matter of fact, I looked at a report that was done by ASDR, I can never get that acronym right, and found that the volume of HF used in California is much higher than anywhere else in the country. I thank you for your attention to this important matter.
Thank you for your testimony.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
thanks, Florence. Can I ask staff if we've scheduled the next refinery committee meeting? I need to make plans for my summer.
The next available date is actually in September, and
okay.
I want to say that that's when we get all the committee members present.
All right, I was
And
holding a
believe it
couple
was-
dates in August, and that's good to know, so yeah.
Yeah, I believe the date is September 22nd, and we're continuing to work on a number of issues.
Yes. Mr. Chair, Florence asked a question, and I don't think this is really for further questions, but I just want to, it's no secret of where the HF comes from. It comes from Honeywell, isn't it?
Honeywell licensed it. The manufacturer is based in Louisiana. It's trucked into the state. I think we've actually discussed that in our presentations at earlier refinery committee meetings.
So,
That's what I understood as well, but that wasn't the answer that I got in the work group meeting. I got this kind of how unreasonable it is for me to ask that question, which I didn't understand at the time.
But who told you? Who said that to you?
Florence, we can speak afterwards, and maybe you could share that information with me?
I'm sorry, what, the information about the volume?
No, the questions that you had asked and who had spoken to you, and it said that it was unreasonable.
Well, it was the two representatives of the district that were there at the meeting, and the question I asked was, I did ask it in the context of if we already had the answer to this question, I'm sorry, but I'd like to know where the two refineries get the modified HF. And the answer that I got, and in fact, we have a comment from the staff person that was there perhaps. It was like, that seemed to be an unreasonable question for me to ask.
Perhaps we can talk later and I can address some concerns.
Thank
and
you.
learn more about your issues. We'll do
Mr. Chris
that.
Forth, I'm sorry that I jumped over you, but I have been duly reprimanded by my colleagues. If you're still here, Chris Forth.
Thanks, Florence.
Thank you, Florence.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Maria
It may have been a mistake.
Jacques.
Jaques, not Jacques.
Jaques. I'm sorry.
Buenos días. Mi nombre es María Jaques. Mi nombre es María Jaques. Y vengo del Valle de San Fernando, exactamente de Sun Valley.
Good morning. My name is Maria Jaques. I come from the San Fernando Valley, specifically from the area of Sun Valley.
Yo vengo a preguntar en este día a ustedes, ¿por qué razón nos han puesto a nosotros un moledor en Sun Valley, donde todos estamos enfermos?
I come here to ask you why you have placed a recycling site in Sun Valley and that is making us all sick.
Todos niños, adultos y ancianos padecemos de asma, de alergias, no podemos respirar. A mí ya me detectaron el bronquitis, el asma, y todos estamos enfermos. Más de 20,000 personas estamos enfermas ahí, en esa área.
The elderly, children, and we are sick. We have asthma. Specifically, I have bronchitis, and over 20,000 people are affected by this facility in this area.
Este negocio lo han puesto al lado del parque, donde toda la comunidad, es lo único que tenemos ahí en Sun Valley, un parque, y ahí es donde lo han puesto al lado del parque.
This facility is located near a park, is the only park in Sun Valley, and this facility is right next to it.
Y han puesto otro también enfrente de la escuela Arminta en North Hollywood.
There's also another one, this near school Armeta, near North Hollywood.
Los trailers que llevan todo el material nos han destruido nuestras casas, se están abriendo, las bardas se están cayendo y no sé con quién tenemos que ir a arreglar esta situación. De verdad que necesitamos mucha ayuda.
The trucks that carry the materials to these facilities are destroying our houses, our fences, and we no longer know who to reach out to in order to fix our homes.
Y este trabajo lo hacen 24 horas al día. No dormimos toda la noche porque pasan los trailers. En fines de semana, en días de los weekends, los días que son festivos, nunca los cierran. Está abierto 24 horas.
This facility is open 24 hours a day. They never close 7 days a week, including holidays.
Usan máscaras para moler y para poner líquidos, usan máscaras y se protegen, pero nosotros no nos dicen de qué manera nos tenemos que proteger.
At the facility, they use masks to protect themselves, but yet the community is not informed as to how to protect ourselves.
Solo quisiera saber a qué podemos hacer. He hablado al aire control y van y dicen que no miran nada. Y están todas las casas y los carros llenos de tierra, hasta dentro de nuestras casas está la tierra, en la sala, en los cuartos. Y la compañía de Air Control dice que no mira nada.
We have called the Air Quality Management District, and we call, and when they arrive inspectors arrive at the facility, or the area, they say that they don't see anything yet. All the cars and houses are full of dust.
He ido a Building and Safety, tengo el número de muchos inspectores, les he hablado, van y según chequean, dice que tampoco miran nada. Hemos tratado, somos muchos los que estamos en esto, hemos tratado de hablar con la concejal, tampoco no nos pone atención. Quien les dio el permiso para hacer esto, según dicen, fue el Neighborhood Council, May O'Gara.
We have gone to public safety. We have gotten also inspectors there, and they don't see anything. Apparently, the person that authorized this facilities was the neighborhood council, and we have tried to talk to our elected, but we have not been successful.
No entiendo por qué siempre mandaron unas cartas a nuestras casas que iban a poner un Starbucks, pero por qué no mandaron unas cartas a nosotros para decirnos que nos iban a poner un moledor de reciclaje de todo lo que recogen de la calle y de los edificios viejos que tumban, ahí es lo que muelen.
We receive notices about putting a Starbucks, yet we don't receive any notice on the siting of a recycling facility where they demolish all materials, including building materials.
Nosotros necesitamos unos $5 millones para reparar nuestras casas y para que las personas que estamos enfermas nos paguen los recibos del doctor, ya que ahí en esa área más del 40% no tienen documentos y no van al doctor. Andan enfermos de los ojos hinchados porque los vidrios, como muelen todo, los vidrios hasta se les han metido en los ojos y tenemos fotos también de eso.
We need approximately $5 million to repair our houses, and also to take care of our health. There is a large population of undocumented people in the area, and which don't have access to medical care. And the fact that they recycle glass materials, that glass powder is, they having a problem with their eyes.
La última vez que hablé con el control, dijeron que cerráramos bien las ventanas y pusiéramos las cortinas para que no entrara polvo. Gracias por escucharme. Que tengan un lindo día.
The last time that I spoke with the air quality, they told me to close the windows and to make sure my house were airtight so it didn't affect me. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And can we have somebody speak with her and follow up on this?
Yes, Ms. Coleman, who's in charge of our enforcement office and our inspectors, will speak with Ms. Jaquez right after this.
Okay, thank you. And Chris Forth didn't show up? Didn't come forth, then we'll move to closed session.
Yes, Mr. Chair. It is necessary for the board to recess to closed session pursuant to Government Code Sections 54956.9 sub A and 54956.9 sub D sub 1 to confer with its counsel regarding pending litigation which has been initiated formally and to which the SCAQMD is a party. The actions are Communities for a Better Environment versus SCAQMD, Los Angeles Superior Court Case Number BS 161399, Reclaim, People of the State of California, XREL SCAQMD, VXI Technologies, Los Angeles Superior Court Case Number BC 533528, InReXI Technologies, Inc., U.S. Bankruptcy Court, District of Delaware, Case Number 13-11482, KJC, Bankruptcy Case, Johnson Controls, Inc., v. SCAQMD, Los Angeles Superior Court Case Number BS 173108, and Rainbow Transfer Recycling, Inc., v. South Coast Air Quality Management District, et al., Los Angeles Superior Court Case Number BS 171620, and in the matter of SCAQMD v. Rainbow Transfer Recycling, Inc., SCAQMD Hearing Board Case Number 4394-2. It is also necessary for the board to recess to close session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 sub A and 54956.9 sub D sub 4 to consider initiation of litigation or cases. A report of the reportable actions taken in closed session will be filed with the clerk of the board. The meeting is adjourned.